We're ready to get to fantasy football drafts so we can pick those players that we know are going to be those breakouts, those sleepers, the rookies. We are excited, but not for these guys. Maybe they're being drafted too soon. Maybe we've just drafted them too much over the years. Maybe you're just tired of them getting hurt. Here are some players we're just getting sick of drafting. All right, Chris, who are you off of this year?
Yeah, I'm just really getting tired of drafting DK Metcalf, and I wish it didn't have to be this way, because I actually really like DK Metcalf. I mean, he's great. He's fun. He's great to root for. Like, I want to root for DK Metcalf. The problem is every year you've got to pay a premium for DK Metcalf. You got to use like a third-round pick to get DK Metcalf like he's some stud, and you don't get premium results. Sure, you might get a handful of games every year where you're like, hey, I'm really glad I had DK Metcalf in my lineup. But the rest of the time, he's just, okay to not very good. Unfortunately, the days like we saw, his year 2 breakout when it was Russ was still cooking and it was just him and Tyler Lockett, those days are gone because Russ isn't cooking anymore no matter where he plays, and it's Geno Smith now. Not to mention they drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba, who took targets away from him last year. We saw DK Metcalf not really have a great year. Only one time in his career, in fact, that second year I mentioned, has he even been inside the top 20 wide receivers at the end of the season in terms of points per game. Yet he's always valued as like a borderline wide receiver 1. So I really wish I didn't have to be tired of drafting DK Metcalf, because it's fun to root for DK Metcalf. It's fun to have him on my team. But paying a premium price for non-premium results is not something I like doing in my fantasy drafts.
I hear you. You know what? We're still paying a premium on Travis Kelce because it's been almost a decade where he was just the top tight end in fantasy until last year when he finally wasn't. And I don't think he will be this year. So here's the question. Now that he's being drafted as the number 2 tight end for the most part, is he a value or is he getting by still on name value? We saw a drop in terms of statistics last year. His yards per game dropped quite a bit from 78 yards per game to 65 over the course of the past season. And his yards per reception was a career low. All right, so when he's putting up numbers that we haven't seen since 2015, you got to wonder, is he starting to slip? I'm not even going to go there as far as other possible reasons why maybe he was distracted last year. Look, we also have to face the fact that he's played a lot of football. He's getting older. His brother just retired. Look, maybe we aren't going to see prime Travis Kelce anymore. All right, he's still going to be a very good pass catcher. I believe that. He's still going to be one of the better fantasy tight ends. But does he belong as the number 2 tight end in fantasy? And does he need to be drafted where we're taking him still, like round 4? I don't think so. I mean, I'm kind of off drafting tight ends early anyways, and at this point, I think I'm off of Travis Kelce. All right, who else are you just getting tired of?
Yeah, and look, I'm not trying to pick on the Seattle Seahawks here, but I'm tired of drafting Kenneth Walker, or like I did last year, trading for Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker so far in his first 2 years has averaged 13.5 PPR points per game and 13.3 points per game. I mean, that's fine as like a low-end RB2, like I guess, but not a guy that's viewed as, borderline RB1 or a set and forget running back. The problem is he doesn't catch any passes or hardly any passes. So he's very reliant on touchdowns. Guys like that are just going to be this way, right? They can't rip off 100 yards and score a touchdown every week of the season, especially in the Seattle offense. This isn't an offense where you can feel good that this guy's going to score double-digit touchdowns every year. And even though his ADP has dropped somewhat, since they drafted Zach Charbonnet last year, he's still somebody you got to draft around the 5th round. And there's other running backs in this range that I think just have way more upside and actually do catch passes. So as talented as Kenneth Walker is, as good as he is as a real-life running back, in fantasy, he's just kind of blah. And I'm just tired of drafting running backs like him that are just okay and need touchdowns to give you any kind of upside.
Now, when it comes to the 49ers, they were the best team in the NFC last year and arguably the most fantasy-friendly offense that there is. So we should be all in on every skill player we could possibly get there. But you know what? I think that Deebo Samuel is still kind of getting by based on that career year he had a couple of seasons ago. Now, here's the thing with Deebo. Some people will still think that he's a guy who can carry your fantasy team because he still has those huge boom weeks. And I'm sure he'll still have a couple this season. But I do think that this is a player that's getting a little bit overrated still in fantasy. Look, some people think Brandon Ayuk is going to go somewhere else. Look, maybe he will, maybe he won't. Let's consider the possibility he doesn't get traded, all right? Deebo Samuel will play the same role where he's not getting those rushing opportunities near the goal line with Christian McCaffrey there, also soaking up a ton of targets. They've got a good tight end. They've got plenty of options here. Deebo Samuel isn't going to be the guy he was a couple years ago when he had his huge breakout because he's not the only show in town. Here's the other thing with Deebo. A lot of people kind of mark against him the fact that he's always hurt. He always misses games. He actually hasn't missed as many games as you feel like he has. Seems like he's always hurt, always on the injury report. He only missed 2 games last year. He only missed 4 the year before. But it still always feels like you never really trust him in your lineup because you never know when that's going to happen. You never know when the next injury is going to come that leaves him out for several games. But also, he did hurt us in a lot of ways last year by being really good right before the fantasy playoffs and then doing almost nothing during the fantasy playoffs. I'm just kind of tired of having a guy that I have to draft in the first couple of rounds as an elite receiver that I don't ever trust. And I still just don't trust Deebo. All right, but we're not done with San Francisco.
Yeah, I am tired of drafting George Kittle. This guy is considered, an elite fantasy tight end. Kind of like what you said with Deebo, because of what he did a few years ago, that epic, record-breaking season. And sure, 4, maybe 5 times a season, he will help you win a matchup. He will just absolutely go off and have this huge game, score 2 touchdowns. But the rest of the time, you're looking at him like, I could have started 5 or 6 guys off the waiver wire that were better than George Kittle. I mean, he's the definition of boom bust at tight end. And the problem is his busts are really bad. Like, they really hurt you. And last year, I drafted him because I thought he was a value. And yeah, he had some big games, but you know what? He had so many games where I was just looking at other teams' tight ends that they grabbed off waiver wire and thinking, why didn't I just get that guy instead? Sure, enjoy those weeks when he goes off and, wins you a matchup. And if you're lucky, it'll be in the fantasy playoffs and not, early in the season. But chances are it won't be, and you're going to get crushed when it matters most. And like you said with Deebo, he's getting older. There's more mouths to feed here. I'm just done drafting George Kittle in fantasy. I just feel like I can wait much later in drafts and get similar production.
Speaking of a player who's all or nothing on a weekly basis, Amari Cooper. Look, it feels like either he single-handedly won you your week or he did nothing. There's hardly any in between. I mean, it's not that drastic, but still, he's had some huge games and then sometimes he disappears. Maybe not all his fault, right? Quarterback situation was a little confusing last year in Cleveland. And they also had some injuries, right? There was really no one else to throw to at times in Cleveland. So he benefited from that, especially we all remember that one epic week late in the season. But what's going to happen this year? Amari Cooper is just one of those guys who will always feel like he never quite reached his potential, even though he never really completely disappoints. Remember for years, with the Raiders, and then with the Cowboys, there's so much excitement about him. Finally, a number 1 receiver for that team. And then it's like, is this it? I mean, this is a player who now is coming off his career best season, 1,250 yards in Cleveland. Never had done that before. He got the 1,000-yard mark a couple of times. But again, never really elite. Never had double-digit touchdowns in a season, believe it or not. And he's been around what seems like forever. It seems like he's always one of those players. It's like, he's the number 1 receiver on his team. He can have those big games, but you're never quite sure when it's going to happen or when you should take him. So you're like, well, I guess this is too late. Let me draft him. And you're never quite happy with it. And I don't know how happy we'll be with Cleveland's pass offense next year, to be honest, because a lot of Cooper's production late last season came with Joe Flacco at quarterback. I don't know. All told, I feel like I settle for Cooper a little too much in the early rounds, so I'm going to try not to do that so much this year. All right, how about another boom-bust receiver that just seems to be a little bit more bust?
Yeah, I'll see your all-or-nothing Amari Cooper, and I'll raise you a really all-or-nothing Christian Watson. This is a guy I've been banging the drum for each of the last 2 seasons. And look, when he's actually fully healthy and not on the injury report, he's been mostly good. The problem is he's hardly ever fully healthy and not on the injury report. And it's not just enough that he's out. Okay, if he's out this week, fine, you don't play him. What's worse is no, he's playing, but he's not really healthy, so he's only going to play 50% of the snaps and maybe get a target and do nothing for you. I mean, this is just the kind of headache you do not need in fantasy. You do not need this kind of headache, especially when you look at this Packers offense now. Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs still there, a red zone threat, Luke Musgrave, the tight end. It's not going to be like Christian Watson is the guy when he's healthy. Yeah, he'll probably pop off once or twice next year if he can actually stay on the field. But really, is that what you're looking for? Do you want to deal with the headache of, is he playing? Is he not? Is he going to be on a snap count? Is he fully healthy? Nah, I'm done dealing with all that. I don't care what the upside is here. I'm done. I'm tired of it.
Well, I'm done with Justin Herbert, believe it or not. Look, last year, the quarterback I drafted the most in redraft was Herbert. I was all in, thought he would have his best season, and it looked like he might for like half a year. And then things started to fall apart, and then he fell apart and got hurt, and then the whole Chargers offense fell apart. So this year, new hope, new coach, but no new receivers. He lost Keenan Allen, right? His main target. Lost Mike Williams, not that he had him most of last year anyways, and we're going to get an extremely run-heavy offense. And I don't even think that that's hyperbole to say this might be the most run-heavy offense in the league, regardless of whoever they wind up with at running back. This is going to be much different. Look, Herbert got by a lot based on volume his first couple of years. When he had his best season, his second year, went over 5,000 yards passing, 38 touchdowns. He threw the ball 672 times, and the next year he threw it 699 times. I don't even know if we're going to see half of that this season, to be honest. And even if he does go back to pass, who is he throwing it to? Quentin Johnson ain't it. Josh Palmer shouldn't be more than like a number 3 guy on most teams. And I don't know what rookie they could possibly get. Well, maybe Malik Nabers. No, that's still not enough for me to think that Herbert's going to be a top 10 quarterback in the offense that they're going to run. So as I was on him last year, I'm basically completely out on him. I don't think I even want to draft him as a starter this year. All right, we're not done yet. I'm sure there's another player that you're done drafting.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I was banging the drum for Najee Harris, saying like, hey, this guy entering year 2 could have an even better season than he had as a rookie. You know, he has a chance to be the top scoring running back, and he was pretty much terrible that year. But even last year, I was like, it's fine. Like, you can still draft him. He'll be good enough. But you know what? Really, Najee Harris, he's just kind of like, meh. He's all right. He's one of these guys, you're like, I'm in a pinch. You can put him in your lineup. But unfortunately, he doesn't catch enough passes now because Jaylen Warren has that role. The offense, I don't care if it's Russ. I don't care if it's Fields. It's not going to have the touchdown upside because guess what? Arthur Smith is the OC. And I'm done with Arthur Smith too. So why would I take any Steelers players? Really, you know what? I'm just tired of drafting all the Steelers players because they're connected to Arthur Smith. What I really should have said here was, I'm tired of Arthur Smith and drafting anybody connected to Arthur Smith. So Najee Harris, tired of drafting you. George Pickens, tired of drafting you. Pat Freiermuth, yeah, I'm tired of drafting you too. Pretty much Najee Harris, all these Steelers, no thanks. I'm not dealing with Arthur Smith again. Tired of drafting all of them.
Yeah, thankfully the Falcons don't have to contend with Arthur Smith this year in his play calling. Darnell Mooney seems like a great fit there, right? Got Kirk Cousins thrown to him. He's going to be the number 2 receiver, you would think, in that offense led by Zach Robinson. So this should be a bounce back year from him. But you know what? I'm tired of waiting for him to bounce back. And you know what? I'm starting to see that the writing on the wall is that maybe Darnell Mooney has never been as good as we thought he is. Because when it comes down to it, in his second year, he kind of got by the fact that he was really the only viable target in that Bears offense. Remember, who was their number 1 guy that year? Oh yeah, it was a Allen Robinson that was already toast. We just didn't know it yet. And behind him, the next best pass catchers on that Bears team were the tight end Cole Kmet, the running back David Montgomery, and then we got Damiere Byrd and Marquise Goodwin. That is the whole of their offense and their pass catchers. So yeah, you can see why Darnell Mooney was their most productive pass catcher. And look, he's fine. I think he's an okay receiver. But in fantasy, I want more than fine. And I'm tired of waiting for him to, have some sort of rebound as if he's going to ever get to 1,000 yards. Even with Kirk Cousins, even this offense, I just don't think it's going to happen. So Darnell Mooney is probably going to get by on that one season still, and all the hope that springs eternal in Atlanta. But I think I'll just pass for a younger option. We're not expecting a breakout season from any of those players, but you want to know who we are expecting to break out in 2024? It's right here.